I'm hopeful. I mean, I feel like Bitcoin can fix this. I mean, I think that Bitcoin, can eventually fix a lot of these issues. Bitcoin's not going to cure disease. I'm not, an idiot on that. But the thing is that it can cure a lot of these ills that we're discussing. Talking about the history of the country, and I'm going to talk about gold for just a minute, but remember that any hardcore Bitcoiners out there, just remember that at one time, gold was hard, sound money. And even though there seems to be this like butting heads with gold bugs, you have to realize that a lot of that is theater. It's people like Peter Schiff who are disingenuous. I basically think he's just a liar anyway. I think his family probably holds Bitcoin. It's theatrics, it's followers. I don't know what the hell he's doing, but he's caused it's caused a rift that doesn't really need to exist. I mean, gold bugs, real gold bugs that believe in hard, sound money, that understand the history of gold in currency, besides being money, they're just Bitcoiners. I mean, they're Bitcoiners. They just don't know it yet, and they're either going to make it here, or because they're getting older, they're just going to die and move on, and then we'll have a new breed. And this breed, like yourself, younger people, they're going to be fixated on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the digital gold, way more than that, but that's just one role it plays. And I can prove what I'm saying because, if you look at world reserve currencies, which the dollar is, that little piece of paper, but if you look at world reserve currencies, the first real currencies based on gold were probably the Florence florin and the Venice ducat. And they were about the size of a dime, pure gold. I mean, pure gold. And they lasted for hundreds of years, a couple hundred years, until Napoleon came into Venice and took over the city, and then took those beautiful horses. I don't know if you've ever seen those brass horses that are there in the Piazza San Marco. Yeah, but anyway, so that's when it collapsed. The real first world's reserve currency, though, was probably Spain's, and that was the silver and gold. So they were bimetallic. And that's the Real de Ocho, which is the pieces of eight. So if you've got any pirate movies that you've ever watched, pieces of eight, that's what they're talking about. And you can actually cut that thing they used to into pieces of eight. And then the escudo, which was their gold coin. So let's talk about that, because here's what happened. And I promise I'll relate to this to Bitcoin, but it wasn't necessarily a successful 200-year reign of gold, even though that's how long their world reserve currency lasted. They were getting that gold from the New World and under brutal, horrible things that they did over there. But they got their gold. They brought it back. And guess what? When one of those big galleons of gold arrived and docked, they had tremendous price inflation. I mean, in fact, it was called the price revolution. And it infiltrated their whole society. And everybody wanted their gold, so they exported their gold out of their country to buy things. They didn't even need to really produce things. It's what happened over a period of a century was they really undercut their small traders, their small townsmen, craftsmen, people that made things. And if this sounds familiar, there's a reason why. And what's really sad, and the reason it didn't work, is because that gold wasn't evenly distributed. That wealth was not evenly distributed. Government, if anybody close to that galleon, think of it as the Cantillon effect. Anybody close to that galleon when it came in there got the gold first, and including the government, but also the royal family. And what's really sad about it is it gave them so much wealth that they were engaged in a whole series of endless wars. Endless wars. And as Saylor was pointing out recently, eventually they lost their gold because it got seized when they made port up there in, I think it was near London. But then on the other flip side, and I promise I won't go much longer, but on the other flip side of this, let's take a look at our country, and let's take a look at gold where it was successful. In 1792, we passed the Coinage Act, and we were on a bimetallic standard also, silver and gold, but gold eventually won out. 1821, the Bank of England was on pure gold. That backed their currency. By the time of the Civil War, most of the major countries were on a gold or bimetallic standard. By the time World War I came along and the Fed was formed, we had 59 countries that were on that standard. And let's just talk about that standard for a minute. Let's talk about what we did. Okay, this is called the Second Industrial Revolution on hard, sound money, not this shit that we got out there right now. Hard, sound money, and gold and silver for all those Bitcoin maxis that hate gold bugs. We invented steel, not just steel, but Bessemer steel, and then stainless steel. So we developed skyscrapers, elevators, we developed ocean liners, steam locomotives, the internal combustion engine, the automobile, the assembly line, the airplane. I mean, all these things, the transcontinental railroads stretching all over the place. The telegraph, the wireless telegraph, the telephone, the electric light bulb. We made a Atlantic telegram cable that connected us, and money changed then big time. AC power, photography, typewriters, sewing machines, the harvester, the reaper, the tractor. I mean, all of these things were developed. And then what happened in 1913? The Fed was formed. By 1914, the world had entered war, World War I. It killed like 10 to 15 million combatants, about the same number of civilians, left people with 10 to 15 million people came back with horrible wounds, missing legs, arms, and everything else, and some more important parts. And what happened? How did World War I stretch for 4 years with all those major nations that were on a gold standard or hard money standard? How did they manage to get all that armature, weapons, people, transport, and just engage in endless death? They did it because they went off the gold standard. They printed money. And at the end of World War I in 1918, all those central bankers, you know what they wanted to do? They wanted to go back to gold. You can see it. You can read about it. There's a great book, Lords of Finance. I've just finished it not long ago, that discusses that. And so what happened? They printed so much money, they couldn't. They tried to go back to the gold standard, and they weren't willing to debase their currencies to actually match that.
It makes me think of the War is a Racket, the book from, I think it was 1932, that Smedley Butler was, writing about a lot of this stuff, which, again, obviously the Fed, what happened there, enriching all these companies, kind of like that, the origins of the military industrial complex, and what Eisenhower, which you alluded to earlier, what he was speaking of. But it's fascinating. You look back to JP Morgan, the Lords of Finance, those are such good books. There's so many, I think Tycoon's another one. There's a bunch of those books that are so good, and they talk about JP Morgan. And I was just in the Titanic conspiracy theory rabbit hole the other day of JP Morgan had the ticket on the Titanic, and then he dropped out last second. He owned a bunch of the White Star Line stuff, and a bunch of the opponents of the Federal Reserve were on the Titanic and went down with the Titanic. Going back to the money, I didn't learn this stuff until I was in Bitcoin. I was very political for so long, for years, like we talked about earlier. And you can't see it from politics. You cannot, if you're in a political realm of red versus blue, you cannot see these things. And only until you will start learning Bitcoin and get into the Bitcoin rabbit hole can you really start seeing, and the scales come off of your eyes of, holy cow. Like, again, the documents of this country are unbelievable and make it exceptional, but the people inside of it can do really bad things. The government itself can do really bad things. And I think that's what people are starting to learn and understand to a lot of this is what you're alluding to. So it really is this learning process that everyone's starting to go through, and really getting a crash course right now with all the files that are being dropped by Musk in the game.
If you like that clip, then you definitely got to check out this next spicy clip. I think you're really going to like it. Come on, check it out. But if you want the full version, the full interview, and check that out over here. Come on, do it. I'll see you in there.